I've been wanting to make a video like this for a very long time.
But I've been scared because of harassment or people just straight up not believing me.
I wanted to believe that this person would change. I was hoping to put the past behind us and officially move on for good.
But it seems like that's not the case. This person has manipulated, emotionally abused, guilt-tripped, and pushed the voices down of myself and so many others, and I'm fucking sick of it. I want someone to hear us for once. I don't want our experiences to be pushed under the rug anymore. I am sorry to anyone I disappoint by making this video, but if you know anything about this person as much as we do, you'd know that they've been getting away with this shit for years now, and someone needs to bring this to light.
This video will most likely be broken into several parts, so you won't be forced to watch an hour-long video or something, and also to prevent a large workload on me and my laptop. Before we start this video, here are a few things that should be considered while watching.
I will not be denying any trauma or harm I have caused to this person. It has been included in all parts of this video.
Just because I did bad things doesn't mean this person's behavior shouldn't be considered. A lot of stuff is old, so it's either been forgotten, deleted, or hasn't been backed up properly at all.
So if you want to believe I'm lying for attention, then believe that, I guess.
I was extremely depressed for long periods of time during all this, especially during late 2020 and early 2021. In fact, I'd forgotten most of this stuff until I actually went back and saw the screenshots and messages, so forgive me if I leave out anything. I'll only talk about the person in this video. Unless events in the video directly affect this whole situation, it will not be mentioned.
Don't use my experience for the purpose to harass this person. I don't condone that behavior anymore, and doing that isn't gonna make my pain or others disappear.
Yes, it's true that the person in the video apologized for many of these things, but despite these apologies, a lot of their behavior has persisted in recent times and has gone almost completely unnoticed, which is why I'm making this in the first place. If you have an experience you'd like to share, please post it in the comments.
Trigger warning for all of these: doxing, toxic relationships, suicide, self-harm, CP not in real life, NSFW, manipulation, emotional abuse, blood not in real life, grooming, pedophilia.
On December 3rd, 2019, I was invited to a now ex-friend server where I met several people, including Pastor. I don't remember exactly how it happened, but eventually me and Pastor became somewhat close and had a parent/child friendship.
Before I even joined her first server, Pastor was a very sexual person, which was weird, especially because she was only 12.
She was drawing really weird photos of her persona in suggestive poses or even just straight up P-word. I had confronted her about this, and she explained her reasoning being her hormones, but promised she wouldn't draw herself like that anymore. On March 30th, 2020, I, now 13, had joined Pastor's first server.
I met a few people on that server, who will be mentioned when needed, but with their name and profile censored out for their own privacy, except for some exceptions. Others will be censored for the safety of my loved ones, instead of for themselves.
The day during and after I joined, there were already problems beginning to start,
such as an argument between my ex-friend
and Pastor within her own server, which I
have a faint memory of happening,
and Pastor having an NSFW channel to post P-word in despite the entire server being full of kids. Despite these obvious blaring red flags, for some reason I decided to stay.
I had only known her for 3 months at this point,
and her desire to draw P-word of herself never went away. It actually got to the point where a rule was deleted about not having CP in the server.
She kept sending more NSFW to people unprovoked while also posting P-word of herself and others, which I will get to later.
At some point, my ex-friend left Pastor for a while due to Pastor actually leaking their full name,
and her now ex-boyfriend
attempting to leak their IP, but failed.
Because my ex-friend used a VPN, Pastor did nothing about it.
She even told me it was just a joke, but clearly it wasn't. Eventually, for a reason I can't remember, Pastor's account was compromised or deleted, and eventually a new server was made.
In this new server, Pastor's old behavior continued. She would again just be very inappropriate sexually, and would even make P-word jokes including me this time, which her ex-boyfriend also made. Pastor did nothing to stop him.
I obviously gave negative reactions to this, but apparently that wasn't enough to stop her.
In this time period, Pasta's relationship with her ex worsened, and relationships with people in general. Both of their behaviors in the server became much more erratic and chaotic, which was very stressful if you were there.
Of course, I don't blame Pasta for being upset, but it seemed like every day Pasta had a problem, and she would post in general chat about her self-harm or suicidal thoughts, even though she made a channel specifically for those situations.
We constantly had to convince her not to hurt herself.
Eventually everything would go back to normal, or as normal as they could be, and we would have to rinse and repeat the process the next day. She would also claim to have a voice, which I guess was some form of DAD she was pretending to have. Her voice was called Blackety, and Blackety acted, typed, and drew the exact same way as Pasta. There was never a clear difference in personality like you would have in DAD.
She attempted to cover it up with the excuse that she allowed Blackety to draw exactly like her. But even then, it's pretty impossible to completely replicate someone's art style without some kind of flaw. At some point, the two were fighting again as usual, and I just got fed up one day and just straight up asked Pastor, well, if your boyfriend is causing you so much pain, why don't you just break up?
Pasta refused at first. She brought up so many reasons as to why they shouldn't ever break up. She even said her relationship is only bad because she wants pain.
But eventually, after lots of convincing, Pasta broke up with him, but not without him fighting back, of course.
For some reason though, instead of trying to take a break, Pasta got into a different relationship within the same day.
This is also the day Pasta and her ex, Jacob or Swaggy, started to hate Ecother. Everyone had left to a newer server without Jacob, and Jacob was now the owner of the old and dead server.
Well, everyone except for me and a few others. I'm not sure why I stayed, and I have no idea why the others stayed either, but
we did. I think it partly has to do with the fact I felt empathy for Jacob.
You might be wondering how in the goddamn I even felt empathy for him when he was such a terrible person back then. Well, I do have a few guesses. I don't really want to say the reason. It's kinda embarrassing when I think about it, so I just won't. But I will say I did really try to see the good in people back then.
At the start, I wanted nothing to do with Jacob at all. I kept a safe distance from him because of the shit he already caused, and for some reason Pasta never got the same treatment despite her also being
pretty terrible, even before Jacob.
But the Jacob started acting nice, well, mostly towards me at first, and he was actually listening to me when I told him not to do bad things.
Eventually, he confessed that he liked me, and I gave a positive response.
But remember when I said Pasta hated Jacob?
Well, turns out that wasn't really the full truth.
For this part, a lot of stuff that should be here is completely missing. Almost no proof of this exists. Thanks to the server, it was in being completely deleted, but some more evidence will be presented later to back this part up.
So when Jacob confessed, he started
saying stuff like, I love you, for obvious reasons, and for some reason I just started saying it back.
Like I wish I was lying to you and I say I had no clue why I said it back then,
but I just did.
I wasn't even sure I liked him back yet. Some feelings did develop, but I wasn't aware of them at the time.
And yeah, you might think I'm a shit person for doing her dirty and dating her ex, but to be fair, Pasta was not a great partner to anyone she's dated, even if all 9 of them were terrible people themselves.
So obviously Pasta had a bad reaction to me and Jacob dating, and at first we assumed it was because of an old ship that I was basically forced into. And I think she also originally stated the reason for her being upset.
But the real reason ended up being revealed, which was that she actually still did have a thing for Jacob after all. And I mean that's not a surprise considering how she wouldn't even let herself heal first before entering a new relationship. Pasta started to make a bunch of vents, both that are still up and that I have downloaded to make sure she wouldn't delete them, and starting threatening self-harm and suicide if we didn't break up. And yes, from her point of view, I can see that her reaction was warranted. But you gotta admit that her threatening suicide and self-harm was fucked up and made things more tense than if she hadn't done that.
I remember panicking during those 2 days. I tried to contact someone, anyone to help me in this situation. I remember crying and pacing in my room late at night thinking she was really gone.
But then Pastor ended up admitting that she faked it for attention. I took this screenshot the exact moment it happened, because I knew deep down Pastor would deny it if I hadn't. In fact, people still ended up not believing me and taking my side, and they still don't. Despite it being an almost perfect clear screenshot, if it weren't for the text being cut off because I took it so fast, the only reason my side wasn't taken is because Pastor decided to backtrack and say that it wasn't for attention and that she attempted it for real. But I guess it's fine. We can't have everything we want, I guess. When that didn't work, Pastor decided to at least get Jacob's attention, even if that meant trying to force him to dox her, which is what she did, but failed. And so when that didn't work, Pastor just started venting at the sight of
Me and Jacob even daring to be
close in a place where she'd be able to view it. She tried again to get Jacob to dox her in another attempt to get attention from him, which failed again. At this point, Jacob was just trying to change, although he was very early in his changing process, so in 2020 through 2021 you'd still see him acting up. He wasn't as bad in 2021 though.
that, and the fact that Jacob was already dealing with something else, which affected his relationships with everyone significantly.
But I won't go into too much detail because that's not my experience to tell, unless he wants me to. We're all a lot different now and have 100% realized what we've done, which is why everything horrible we caused is being included instead of hidden.
I want this to be as transparent and honest as possible.
So at this point, I think Jacob just got fed up and decided to retaliate against Pastor because she wouldn't leave him alone, which wasn't the best way to deal with that, but we were all like 12 to 13 years old, so our judgment was awful, and so were our emotions and hormones. She tried again to make him leak her address, and that's when he sent her P-word. Pastor then started to compare me and Jacob's relationship to Cynthia, Cinny03 and Birdie/Jack, because Cynthia was interacting with Jack at the time despite the accusations against Jack. I'm not gonna unpack everything with that situation, so just look up Birdie drama and Birdie Cinny03. Just a warning though, the Birdie drama is longer than all parts of this video combined. Pastor kept going on with the vents, threatening self-harm and suicide. It was a nightmare on all sides. It came to a point where it actually became a running joke whenever Pastor vented. Like any time she would vent, we would go, oh there she goes again. Pastor tried everything in her power to make us split. She even got one of her friends to try and convince me to leave Jacob. And when I confronted her, her supposed reasoning was that she wants pain. A lot of her friends actually brushed us aside whenever she did something awful, which was a lot, but attacked us whenever we did something wrong.
I was getting DMS constantly while Pastor just was allowed to basically do whatever she wanted. It was so unfair. I felt helpless. We pretty much just had to sit there and take whatever Pastor threw at us.
At this point, it was like she was poking a bear with a stick, because after a while we started to get even more pissed.
She even made a vent about me just saying I loved my boyfriend because she was mad I did it in service she was in, aka the only service me and Jacob constantly interacted in, and she could leave whenever she wanted. I wanted so badly to tell her how annoying it was, but I knew I couldn't because if I did, I would be in the wrong.
So I chose to do it through Jacob, who actually didn't care if she was upset or not at what he said. But that changed pretty quickly, because one day I just snapped. After a whole month of dealing with Pastor every day since the exact moment I started dating Jacob, not even an exaggeration. When I was looking back at DMS, it was every single day this girl had a problem. I was done. I was sick of her constantly bothering us while we were forced to sit there and take it. So I said, you know what, fuck it, and sent a lengthy paragraph as my response to everything Pastor did to me and Jacob throughout that entire month. Jacob did the same, and we both left the server. Well, only for a bit before Jacob and Pastor reconciled, and I questioned Jacob, asking why in God's name he would even consider doing that. But even he didn't know why, because he knew that we knew she was always awful to us. He ended up just leaving and blocking her again though, but I guess Pastor had other ideas, because even though he blocked her, she decided to go on every single account he owned and post a link to a server to try and get him to join. She got so desperate to the point where she came up with this idea that I'm somehow controlling Jacob into saying a bunch of shit, when in reality, I was just looking out for him and speaking my mind. I thought it was best to stay away because of everything that happened, nothing more. She was really desperate to have him around her again, and I think the gross amount of that really shows when you look at these messages. She clearly wasn't healthy enough to have a proper relationship with him, to the point where she let him treat her terribly. She continued to make vents about it while reaching out to Jacob's every single account, even though he made it 100% clear he didn't want to be near her. Jacob ended up pretending some random person was controlling him just so Pastor would stop blaming me for something I didn't even fucking do. And just to be sure I wasn't manipulating Jacob's decision in any kind of way, I asked him personally at that moment to see what his thoughts were. He had mixed feelings about it and was unsure what to do. I was getting nervous at how close she was trying to be with him. Just thinking about it makes me nervous. Again, not going into details, but I just get really fucking nervous when I think my friends or partners are gonna leave me or replace me. And her constantly doing this was not helping that fear. Like, I'm surprised I didn't get a panic attack yet, 'cause I know if this happened today, I'd be crying so hard. I don't even remember if we left or stuck around or not because my memory is just a blur here. I think I left completely, but Jacob kept leaving and coming back. I'm gonna end this here. I think that's enough information to swallow for one video. You can take a break now and process all the information now. So yeah. Okay, bye.